As plenty of comic book heroes will tell you, superpowers aren't always gifts, but that doesn't stop people from dreaming about them nonetheless. From the most iconic powers to the strangest and quirkiest abilities, here are the best superpowers of all time. Superhuman strength is probably the most common power out there. The vast majority of superheroes can perform feats of unusual strength, mostly because saving the day is a whole lot easier when your muscles have the capacity to throw cars, lift mountains, or even bicep curl a helicopter. Jessica Jones star Kristen Ritter has cited her character's enhanced strength as the superpower she'd most like to have in real life, and it's easy to see why. Aside from the obvious day-to-day benefits, Jessica's ability to punch holes in concrete often comes in handy when she goes wandering down some of New York's sketchier streets. Interestingly enough, this is one superpower that you could argue exists in real life. Currently, the world's strongest human is young Icelander Hafthor Ules Bjornsson, better known as the Mountain on Game of Thrones, who also holds the world's record for heaviest deadlift, coming in at 1,041 pounds. That's impressive in itself, but if you want more comic-style strength beats, you could always look elsewhere in the animal kingdom. The horned dung beetle, according to the BBC, is capable of pulling 1,114 times its own weight. That's the equivalent of a 200-pound human carting around a little over 114 tons. The ability to cloak into your surroundings is another classic superpower that humans have imagined for centuries, and it's been a staple power in science fiction ever since the 1897 H.G. Wells novel The Invisible Man.
I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I've become invisible to the eye.
In comics, of course, the top heroes to rock this power are Sue Storm of the Fantastic Four, and more recently, Miles Morales, whose camouflage abilities played a key role in 2018's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. In practice, invisibility would probably be the #1 superpower for any secret agent. After all, it would let you get in and out of anywhere totally undetected. The tactical usefulness of such an ability has led to much theorizing about how it could be made possible in real life, with many scientists trying to figure out ways to achieve the effect by bending light around physical objects. So far, the researchers at Duke University have come the closest with their invention of an invisibility cloak that hides objects from microwaves, albeit not the visible eye. There's a good reason that speedsters like the Flash also tend to be quick-witted, quick-thinking quipsters. For one, if you could move through the world that fast, can you imagine how soul-crushingly slow standing in line at the DMV would feel? Also, it stands to reason that a speedster's ability to physically survive one of their super-fast runs would also require that their brain process information just as rapidly. When they run, their reflexes need to catch every mosquito and speed bump, or they die just as quickly as they can run. That said, in recent years, cinema has reimagined super speed to the point where it has arguably become a totally different superpower. For example, Wired theorized that Quicksilver from the X-Men movies doesn't actually run fast so much as he has the power to warp time. As demonstrated in a number of sequences in those films, Quicksilver can process things at an ordinary speed while everyone else creeps at a snail's pace. But when he's not showing off, he's able to hold regular conversations, as if he's experiencing time at the same speed as everybody else. The power set exhibited by the DCEU Flash and Justice League was also more of a time-warping variety than super speed, but that of course may change in future movies. Daredevil's powers might be understated, but when you stop to think about them, they'd be ridiculously useful to have in real life, even if you weren't a Hell's Kitchen-based vigilante. Blindness aside, Daredevil can hear, smell, touch, taste, and radar sense his way through the world in a manner far more developed than any regular human being. When it comes to touch, for example, he can feel the ink letters embossed on a printed page, and thus read non-braille writing simply by passing his finger over the text. And when it comes to the sense of smell, he can recognize any person in a crowd, track them from miles away, know what they ate for dinner last night, or pick up on scents that might have attached to their jacket during that sketchy meeting at Josie's bar. It's also almost impossible to drug or poison a super sensor, since they'll be able to taste everything that touches their tongue. Then there's that enhanced hearing, which allows Matt Murdock to listen to a person's heartbeat, basically making him a human lie detector. To finish it off, his radar sense allows him to perceive all objects in his vicinity, which is difficult to depict on film, but highly useful in combat nonetheless. Of course, when you combine all these abilities together and throw in a little martial arts training, the end results are some of the best hallway fight sequences in superhero history. Don't like where a situation is headed? If you're Nightcrawler, you haven't got a problem. Just bamf right out of the room to safety. The way that Kurt Wagner's powers work is that he actually transports his body through another dimension and then pops out in a location of his choosing. That means his molecules don't actually disassemble, he just drops in and out of a portal. Sadly, in the real world, no convenient transport dimension has been found, That means that if science ever does figure out how to make teleportation a reality, it will pose some weird ethical quandaries. Namely, if a teleportation machine works similarly to fax or television, the person who reappears in a new location would be a perfect duplicate of the original person, meaning that John Doe would actually have been murdered and cloned rather than actually teleported. And that might be the least of your problems. If you're a comics newbie, one of the first things that's really going to confuse you about the Marvel Universe is how Iceman, of all characters, could possibly be one of the most powerful X-Men. Yeah, Iceman, the dude who, well, is made of ice. They're right though, Iceman is classified as an Omega-level mutant, and that's because his true power is cryokinesis, the ability to control moisture itself. Think about it, moisture is everywhere, from the air you breathe to the sweat running down your forehead, and Iceman can manipulate it down to a molecular level. If he got angry, he could freeze the blood going into a person's brain. He can also stop fire-powered mutants from even activating their powers. Most incredibly of all, Iceman can even physically cause another human being to evaporate into seeming nothingness, and if he feels like it, bring them back unharmed. Now, if you're wondering why we've never seen Bobby Drake do any of this trippy stuff in the movies, there's a good reason for that. A big part of Iceman's character arc involves his self-confidence issues and his difficulties in unlocking his full potential. Of course, if and when this guy comes back into the MCU X-Men reboot, you can expect to see him pull off some seriously cool party tricks. If there's any X-Men character who hasn't gotten quite enough screen time, it's Storm. After all, there's some crazy potential in her ability to control the weather, which really hasn't been explored enough. Sure, Thor can twist lightning to his will, but Storm's weather manipulation extends to snow, hail, tornadoes, hurricanes, and that's just the start. When you consider how much weather plays a role in human events, that's a pretty big deal. Storm's daily life is bound to be way different than anyone else's. She'll never have to worry about being rained out of a beach day or a barbecue, and those crazy powers are just the tip of the iceberg. Carol Danvers is a superhero so powerful that an entire alien army would be more concerned with shooting her out of the sky than dealing with literally every other Marvel superhero on the ground. In fact, Danvers had to sit out much of Avengers Endgame because of her hugely overpowered ability to wipe out most bad guys in a matter of seconds. The key to Carol's power is that she's basically able to channel a massive amount of energy, taking on what is known as her binary form. In cinematic terms, you know Carol's gone binary when she powers up, pulses energy from her eyes, and flies off to blow up a spaceship. This form tends to emerge on especially dangerous occasions, but it gives her somewhat ambiguous control over the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It also helps that her power set includes controlling gravity and moving at the speed of light. The endless possibilities offered by shape-shifting powers, like those wielded by Mystique or the Skrulls, are too numerous to list. Need to break into a bad guy's top-secret corporate offices? Just make yourself look like that bad guy. Undercover information needed? Change your face. Trying to confuse and manipulate someone to do your bidding? Just pretend to be one of their friends.
They say you can imitate anybody. Even their voice. Even their voice.
As fun as shape-shifting powers might be, they also forever paint you as a shady character, since your entire MO revolves around pretending to be other people or objects. It's no surprise that whenever the notion of shape-shifting powers has appeared throughout history, it has usually involved some deceptiveness, whether by North America's skinwalkers or the uncomfortable flirtations of Zeus. Of course, Mystique, for her part, is not exactly the most trustworthy Marvel character out there, and that's putting it lightly. If you've ever been a competitive swimmer or just love activities like scuba diving and snorkeling, you've probably wished at least once in your life that you were Aquaman, and who wouldn't? Whenever Arthur Curry wants a nice adrenaline rush, all he has to do is dive to the bottom of the ocean, where he can spend hours checking out anything from hidden treasures to shipwrecks to bizarre life forms that most humans don't even know exist. The ability for humans to perform liquid breathing using a synthetic substance called perfluorocarbon is actually possible, as you might have seen portrayed in the James Cameron movie The Abyss. However, for a truly amphibious person like Aquaman to function in real life, the entire makeup of his body would have to be dramatically different than that of a land creature, and gills are just the first part of that. For one, his body needs to find a way to deal with the bends. Osmotic pressure is another obstacle. Also, considering his lack of fur or blubber, the average mammal's body might have some difficulties with the cold temperatures at the ocean floor. Then again, no one really needs to see Jason Momoa covered up in blubber and fur. Individual powers aside, Spider-Man has the coolest power combo out of anyone, in that each of his weird abilities perfectly complement one another. However, the web-slinger's #1 spider power has got to be his ability to detect any signs of danger before that danger actually strikes. In real life, it would take time and practice for you to master this ability, which is why Tom Holland's version of Peter had to wrestle with it a bit before going full throttle against those drones in Spider-Man Far From Home. That said, once you've earned your stripes, having a spider sense would be a really neat way to avoid traffic accidents, injuries, and other such disasters for the rest of your life, as long as you don't tick off any animal-themed criminals in the process. Actual spiders don't quite have Peter's psychic skills, but interestingly enough, there's some real-life basis for Peter's spider senses. It largely depends on the species, but spiders do possess specialized elongated hairs which are used to detect airborne vibrations, and thus warn them of impending threats. Scarlet Witch's powers can sometimes be a bit hard to get your head around, but there's a good reason that MCU head honcho Kevin Feige thinks that she's one of the only Avengers who could take down Thanos by herself. What Wanda does is tap into something called chaos magic, which she can control to suit her needs. In a regular battle, this can take the form of a bolt of energy or the ability to manipulate matter around her. At her most powerful, however, Wanda is able to reshape the fabric of reality itself, essentially transforming the universe according to her desires, whether conscious or subconscious. This is great for winning fights and great for narrative purposes, but not so great for a regular human being's mental stability. Just take a look at the creepy comic storyline where Wanda's powers created twin children belonging to her and the Vision who didn't really exist. So yeah, chaos magic. Cool? Yes. Desirable? Not so much. Part of what makes you root for Wolverine is that, behind the tough demeanor, adamantium claws, and funky hairstyle, he's actually a pretty vulnerable dude. His loved ones always get killed, his body frequently gets experimented on, and everywhere he goes, someone is trying to hurt him in the most grisly way possible. Of course, that can certainly hurt like crazy, and the only thing that keeps this scrappy guy going is his healing factor, which allows him to recover from almost all mortal wounds in mere moments. Not only is this one of the best powers a person could possibly have, but it's also not such a stretch to imagine it existing in real life, so researchers at Harvard University are trying to make it a reality. Of course, rather than studying comic books, these scientists have examined the three-banded panther worm, known for its ability to regrow parts of its body within a few days of amputation. A spider sense is a great way to avoid injuries. A healing factor will ensure that you easily recover from such injuries if they do happen. Face it though, if you could, you'd just make it so nothing can possibly hurt you in the first place. Enter Luke Cage. Whether Luke is clutching a grenade in his palm or bouncing bricks off his chest, Luke rarely ever gets so much as a scratch, since his skin is as strong as titanium steel. The same can't be said for his hoodies and t-shirts, of course.
Damn, homie, like you went through a cheese grater. Oh snap, you Luke.
Probably the only real downside to this kind of invulnerability is that on the rare occasions where something goes wrong on the inside and Luke requires surgery, it's incredibly difficult to cut him open with anything other than a specialized medical laser. Not fun, but considering that Luke can take blows from the Hulk and walk away without a scratch, it seems like a pretty decent trade-off. You've got to feel bad for Electro, even if he's kind of a jerk. He should be a Magneto-level threat, but his self-confidence issues are so bad that he always wastes his time robbing banks and getting knocked out by some punk kid with spider powers. Admittedly, Max Dillon's everyman problems are a big part of his appeal, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be awed at the sheer scale of what he's capable of. Aside from firing lightning bolts from his hands, Electro can black out entire cities, transport his body through power lines, zap into a room without warning, and even create localized electromagnetic storms. While Electro isn't too hot at realizing his own potential, there are plenty of other electricity-powered characters who do a better job. One of the most notable is Static of Static Shock fame, who uses his powers for things like flying around. Meanwhile, Thor is quite literally the god of blasting people with lightning bolts. Miles Morales has some limited electricity powers too, which he calls Venom Strikes. And on the DC side, of course, there's Black Lightning, as well as the Superman villain Livewire. While super strength is arguably the most common superpower, the most iconic of all has got to be flight. And the credit for that goes to Kal-El, the last son of Krypton and the progenitor of all contemporary superheroes. It took Superman a few good years in the comics before he was given the ability to fly, but soaring through the skies quickly became his main shtick, and now it's one of his most iconic superpowers. That said, if a person were really to fly like Superman, it would necessitate a few other powers to go with it. Most importantly, if you're going to flap through the clouds, you'll want some kind of measure of invulnerability to protect you from birds, airplanes, and drones. Also, as Iron Man found out when he first took his suit on a test flight, you need to figure out a way to deal with that high altitude problem so you don't freeze to death. Apart from that, however, not even the sky's the limit with this one. Frankly, Charles Xavier's powers are so off the charts powerful that many X-Men stories have to find excuses to have him poisoned, trapped, or put in a coma to make sure that he doesn't just go in, wipe the bad guy's mind, and call it a day. Now, being exposed to the thoughts and feelings of millions of people on a daily basis is either going to make you very wise or very crazy. Thankfully for the Marvel Universe, Charles is usually portrayed as the former. And Xavier's powers allow him to do a lot more than simply read minds. He can learn other languages in moments, freeze time by locking everyone around him in stasis, implant or remove memories from other people's minds, and even transfer his consciousness into another body. Basically, he's not a guy you want to mess with. While Xavier isn't the only comic book telepath, he's certainly the one who shows the rest how it's done. And given the sheer scale of the infinite things you could do with powers as strong as those wielded by Professor X, you could make a decent case for telepathy being the best superpower of all time. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.